Hey girls, welcome back to my channel. I'm Holly, and this is the Women series where we talk all things reproductive health, fertility, and women's health. Now, today we are going to be discussing endometriosis as well as polycystic ovarian syndrome. Both of these reproductive health issues are somewhat plaguing the women's health space. We have seen an astronomical increase in the diagnosis of endometriosis, with 1 in 10 women now being formally diagnosed. And with polycystic ovarian syndrome, we know that 1 in 8 women will be dealing with some form of polycystic ovarian syndrome. So if you just look at how much they are impacting and influencing women's reproductive health, you start to realize that our wombs are certainly coming up against it when it comes to inflammation, oxidative stress, fertility, and so forth. Now, a couple of things they won't tell you about endometriosis. The first one being that a laparoscopy, which is the gold standard for diagnosing endometriosis as well as improving the outcome of endometriosis via removing the lesions that are present, can actually cause more endometriosis. And there has been research to show this. So the way that it does that is it obviously increases scarring. And we know with endometriosis that lesions and scarring are a big problem. So for many women who go through the laparoscopy process, they tend to, 1, not get the outcome they desired, which is painless periods, but 2, they tend to find that they have a larger and higher amount of endometriosis quicker than they thought they would. So I bet you're thinking, okay, so what do I do if I have endometriosis? Well, a couple of tips would be to start with looking at your nutrition. Everyone talks about how red meat is not ideal for women with endometriosis. And while this is somewhat true, we are going to debunk that slightly. The reason you get told red meat is not for you is because red meat is high in something called arachidonic acid. Now, arachidonic acid is the byproduct of omega-6 production, and it turns into or metabolizes into a substance called a prostaglandin. With endometriosis, women that have endo, they tend to have a lot of issues with an overabundance of prostaglandin 2. Prostaglandins in general can either turn on or turn off inflammation. So when you have a high amount of prostaglandin 2, you have the pro-inflammation type of prostaglandin. And that's where the chronic pain comes from with endometriosis. So if we go back up that metabolic pathway or that metabolic chain, and we see that arachidonic acid is what creates prostaglandin 2, it makes sense to remove foods that are richest in arachidonic acid. However, the shellfish is very rich in arachidonic acid. Certain dairy products are. So we can't just demonize red meat while not looking at these other foods for the support of endometriosis. The better thing to do would be to question how you can improve the anti-inflammatory prostaglandins, which are the metabolic byproducts of omega-3 and omega-9 consumption, as opposed to just removing and avoiding anything that leads to prostaglandin 2. And that is a byproduct of omega-6. So my suggestion with nutrition to help support your endometriosis is to increase those omega-3 and omega-9 rich foods. Lots of oily fish, olive oil, avocado, nuts and seeds, anything that's rich in omega-3 and omega-9, while also being mindful of your omega-6 and arachidonic acid consumption. The other thing to be aware of with endometriosis is its connection to trauma. So there's a very famous research paper which looked at around 60,000 women, and they surveyed these women who had endometriosis. And for 79% of those women, they found that they had some form of sexual assault in their earlier years. So this paper really highlights that there is a deep connection between what happens to us at a trauma level, at a nervous system level, and how that manifests in the womb. I highly recommend, if you are somebody that has an endometriosis diagnosis, to, on your journey of improving that outcome, to seek out womb massage, spiritual healing, nervous system regulation, and psychotherapy or counseling, because it definitely impacts the detriment and how intense the endometriosis can become. All right, on to Pcos, better known as polycystic ovarian syndrome. So polycystic ovarian syndrome is 100% a metabolic disorder. And what I mean by that is it's heavily influenced by what we eat, how we live, the environment that we're in. And we know this because the main mechanism of Pcos is elevated blood sugar, and in particular, elevated insulin, which is your blood sugar hormone. When your insulin becomes really elevated, that can impact your ovaries producing too much testosterone. And it does that via a mechanism of inflammation at the ovarian level. So what happens is when you have a chronic sustained state of elevated blood sugar, your ovaries will start to produce more testosterone than they should. And that testosterone suppresses your ovulation, and it suppresses your natural menstrual cycle, leading to long cycles or amenorrhea, so 45-day plus cycles, and delayed ovulation. And that's effectively what forms those cysts that are in the name of polycystic ovarian syndrome. Although I should tell you that actually no cysts are found with Pcos. All that you're looking at on your ultrasound are follicles. They're not cysts. But that is the mechanism of Pcos, is elevated insulin and elevated androgens. So we know it is a direct byproduct of your metabolism, of the way that you live, of how you eat. And so with that said, we can definitely improve it by changing up your diet and improving your environment. Some of the things that you can do to improve your Pcos would be to lower your blood sugar. Now, you can do this by increasing salt in your diet, so making sure you're getting good sea salt, good hydration to the cell. Magnesium is really helpful at managing blood sugar regulation, as well as managing your hydration in your cells, so the sodium to potassium pump. Magnesium is essential. So increasing your hydration, electrolytes is the first place to start. Contrary to popular belief, I don't recommend completely cutting out carbs, because we do need carbs to help regulate our nervous system, support progesterone, and so forth. But it's about being mindful of what type of carbohydrates you consume. So you could lean on things like basmati rice, sweet potato, seasonal fruits, as opposed to those highly processed refined carbs that spike your blood sugar in a very negative manner. And you always want to pair a carbohydrate, or you always at every meal want to have a serve of animal protein to help balance out the way in which our body metabolizes those carbs. So ensuring you're having some form of red meat, chicken, seafood, eggs, whatever you like at every meal to help balance out the blood sugar response. A lot of the time, somebody's blood sugar issues are actually just a byproduct of being in a protein deficient body. So instead of looking at it from the perspective of removing carbs, I find that it's easier for people to look at it from the perspective of just increasing their protein serves. And that way you are definitely going to help manage your blood sugar and in turn help manage your Pcos. Finally, for Pcos, some really good supplements that can be super helpful are chromium. I've already mentioned magnesium, Inositol is just an absolute powerhouse when it comes to managing PCOS, and berberine. In fact, in clinical trials, we've seen that berberine outperforms metformin, which is the common pharmaceutical drug provided to women with PCOS and/or diabetes, as it helps to manage your blood sugar. So berberine is a really good option if you find yourself being insulin resistant and diagnosed with PCOS. All right, there you have it, girls. There's some hot tips on endometriosis and PCOS. If you'd like to learn more, I go into detail about both of these reproductive health issues in my Find Your Fertility course, where you can find the link in my bio. And remember to subscribe. If you liked this content, leave me a comment, hit the like button, and I'll be back next week for more information.